I must say, King Shark, your mother would be most displeased to find you in this plebeian company.
You're not my dad!
Welcome, Gothamites, to another episode of the Arkham Sessions. My name is Brian Ward. With me, as always, the psychologist to the superheroes, superheroines, and supervillains of Gotham City and beyond. She's Dr. Drea Letamendi. Hello, Drea.
Hi, Brian. How are you?
My brain is frying out as we speak, as you can just tell.
I can
even
see
our
it
intro
through the seams of your face.
Yeah, I am doing a little better than I have been recently. I think part of that is we've had a significant response via our Patreon to our call to action, our desire to give to wildfire relief. And I am very happy to say that the 2 months that we are donating worth of Patreon and TeePublic brought us to $594. But you and I have discussed it. We're going to add that extra $6 to round it out to an even $600. That means that $300 will go to the Humane Society in Pasadena, and another $300 will go to the American Red Cross.
Right. Yeah, I just want to extend my gratitude and our thanks to the folks who not only participated in this opportunity to donate to these very important charities, but also to folks who have joined our Discord and who have communicated with us over the last couple of months. It has not been easy. It has not been an easy start to the year, but I hope that with our show, we continue to bring solutions, ideas, even just a space of calm, even just a space of a little bit of levity, of comedy. That's on you, by the way.
Oh,
yes, that ain't me.
You're in a world of hurt.
And what's important to me is a little bit of knowledge. So if you're here for any of those things, you're in the right place. I came equipped today with some tools and ideas for folks who feel like they just need a little bit of kind of leveraging or leveling up their utility belt around how to like solve the issues of the day. And when I say the day, I mean all the onslaught of things that are on top of mind for us, whether it's you're just trying to self-regulate or you're trying to enter a conversation that's really difficult for you to have. Our topic today, of course, is the Harley Quinn show, but I'll be responsible around how do we take that content and make it really applied for people who want to learn something about managing their mental health. Before we dive into that, I also want to make a brief announcement that only our Discord members knew about until now, which is that we'll be at WonderCon presenting on a panel. We're not yet allowed to talk about the guests or really the topic.
The topic, yeah.
But what I think I'm allowed to say, and maybe I'm not even allowed to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway, is that we're returning to our roots with the Arkham Sessions. Is that
hint, nudge, nudge?
Yeah,
wink,
no,
wink?
that's a big, big hint.
So you're talking about H.P. Lovecraft. We are going to be
No.
No. Different Arkham. Okay, got it.
An entirely different and less problematic, or maybe more problematic Arkham.
Depending on who.
Depending on what it is that, what version it is that we're talking about. I think I've said too much, actually.
Yeah, you've broken all the rules. We are going to be at WonderCon. We will have a panel. It will be one of those 3 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, in Anaheim, California. March 28th, 29th, 30th, I believe are the 3 dates. We will be there. There will be a panel. You should come. It will be fun. We do have guests. We do have a pretty great topic. It should be fun. Pay attention to our social media because we will make that announcement as soon as it's available. The general rule of thumb is that we are not allowed to post information about the panel until WonderCon has officially announced the panel on their website via their programming page. So until they have done that, we cannot say anything specific, anything more than we've already just said, Drea. But we can tell you that we will be there and that we look forward to seeing all of you at our panel. Are we ready to move into the episode L.O.D.R.S.V.P, Drea?
Yes, I'm ready.
L.O.D., the Legion of Doom, the one place that Harley Quinn is determined to get involved with, the organization of supervillains there in Gotham City and beyond. They are not limited to Gotham, but this is where they all come and hang out. They've got a pretty nice setup. It's basically I would call it like a country club of sorts, a technologically advanced country club, social club for the arch villains of our DC heroes.
Yes, that's right. It's an elite headquarters that's equipped with recreation, with perks, with membership only lifestyle opportunities. So if you're the cream of the crop when it comes to Gotham villains, you're invited to participate at this kind of membership only baddies club. It's something that Harley Quinn continues to be fixated on. She believes that being a member of the Legion of Doom will essentially validate her as, I think, even further than, beyond being a villain, because I think she sees herself as a villain, but only in a superficial way. She sees herself as someone who wants validation and identity and belongingness. And this is the only group of people that she sees as a group of people that can bring her these things, that can give her these things.
Yeah.
So she's been fixated on this for some time.
She is a motivated, go-get-'em type of person. And she may have just gotten them because she has received an invitation because she is a finalist to join the Legion of Doom. Finally, less than a year after she has broken ranks with her former boss, she is and started her own gang. They are now invited to come find out if they have made it into this exclusive club. How did she get this invitation? Well, as we talked about last time, there have been a string of heists every episode. There seems to be a new mission for the group in order to make their way into the Legion of Doom. And each time has been met with varying results. Sometimes they succeed, but usually despite their plan and their inadequacies as villains. And then sometimes they just straight up fail. But in this particular case, I want to say that I think this heist is probably their most competent example of villainy. It's, my brain's fried. It's the most competent case of villainy that we've seen yet. They go down to Atlantis and they steal the family jewels of Atlan and Aquaman, their family, and they manage to succeed. Even when Aquaman emerges from the water and thinks that he has gotten the jewels back, he is then attacked by kelp, and that means only one thing: Poison Ivy is in on this plan, at the very least as an associate of Harley's gang.
Sure.
She is still not an official member of the gang, even though the news media wants to continue to put her in to Harley's gang.
That's right. Ivy is a bit of an in-betweener is how I would consider her, like having her own autonomy, independent thought, not associating with the Legion of Doom, not associating really with even this group, where she would consider them her friends. She would consider them trusting people in her life, especially Harley. They have a very close bond, but she doesn't consider herself a part of the crew. She doesn't align with their mission to go on heists and try to earn their place among Gotham's villains. She has no interest in that. So she's an in-betweener in the sense that when she needs to, she will get involved. And this is one of those situations where I don't think they would have been successful during this heist had Poison Ivy not, swooped in and restrained Aquaman.
Yeah.
And so she has an amazing set of abilities and knows how to use them, but is very decisive on when she intervenes.
It really comes down to this. She is there to get Harley's back at all times, but she is not someone who needs to conduct crime. She is not someone, she has a very focused view of what it is she is fighting for. Robbing banks ain't it. Like, that's not her jam. She specifically wants to fight for the rights of plant life and the environment.
Right.
She does not care about getting into a patriarchal society like the Legion of Doom.
Simply to do evil things.
Yeah.
And remember, when we talk about Harley, I've mentioned psychologically how she does present as someone who is a risk taker, someone who likes the adrenaline, someone who seeks deviance in some ways. Now, look, I want to normalize that those features alone, those features don't make someone a bad person or make someone prone to criminality. Furthermore, those features don't necessarily define a mental health concern. Those could be just very normal characteristics of somebody. But Harley in particular seeks a sensation, a particular sensation. So she has this sort of chronic boredom and she needs to look for excitement. When she was with the Joker, she was particularly happy, not because of the way he treated her, but because she had opportunities to satisfy this risk-taking need. And Ivy Ivy just really wants purpose, right?
Yeah.
Like, when you do something against the law or when you do something that's rebellious, it's to protect the earth. It's to protect her friends, the plants. Harley is still in the mindset of, I've got to do these things. Well, for one, because it feels good. But secondly, now here's another potential outcome, which is I could earn my place as a villain.
Yeah. They are, like I said, invited to the Legion of Doom for an event where they will determine whether she gets in. Her rival in this particular case is KG Beast, and it's. But here's what I find interesting about this particular case. They aren't just offering membership to Harley per se. They are also granting all of the benefits and perks therein to her gang. So they're almost looking at the gang as an entity, not Harley specifically. And therein is the rub, because what they're really doing, as we find out via dialogue between Poison Ivy and Lex Luthor, is that the Legion of Doom have consistently sent Poison Ivy an invitation to join countless times. Over 100 times, Lex corrects her. And she has always turned them down. Once again, validating that she has no desire to be a part of this organization. This is not why she does this. But Lex makes it clear that if she doesn't accept the invitation, Harley will not be admitted into the Legion of Doom. Mm-hmm. They are only letting Harley in order to get Poison Ivy as a member of their ranks. And of course, this means that Poison Ivy is then conflicted throughout the rest of the evening. She doesn't know whether to tell Harley. She doesn't know whether to simply join the Legion in order for her best friend to get in to the one thing she wants to be a part of. And she doesn't know whether to just keep quiet and let Harley not get in. And then we just continue about our day. But she does know that it will absolutely break Harley's heart if she is not accepted into the Legion. So Poison Ivy is really pretty conflicted throughout this episode.
Yeah.
Eventually, we should say that Aquaman busts in to the party, and Harley very quickly, and I would say, again, competently, takes on Aquaman. She's not the only person, but she's certainly the first.
Yeah.
She jumps into action and actually does a bit of damage to Aquaman, knocking him to the ground. Other villains decide to pounce on him, but Aquaman dispatches them pretty easily. And one of these quote unquote villains is Poison Ivy. Poison Ivy is someone who jumps in and tries to attack Aquaman. Aquaman basically lays her out. So she is not living up to the standard of the Legion of Doom. Well, I guess she is, because like all the other members, they're not succeeding either.
I'm kind of giggling here to myself because I love the part where Black Mantis steps in and Aquaman reminds him, like, this ain't about you. And Black Mantis is like, it's not about me. Like,
Right.
just it's a funny line.
Yeah.
Exemplifying the history between them, and also maybe some narcissism going on. I don't know that character that well to know, but
he
cute.
is the arch rival to
like by
Aquaman.
by Aquaman being there, Black Mantis
It's time for me to
by
step up.
definition is like, this is also kind of about me.
Yeah.
For Harley, what I like, this show has a lot of moments of fighting, just beat downs and rivalries that end up in physical fights, and it's entertaining. It's not what I'm looking for, right? As someone who's looking at the show for psychological elements, I'm wondering what this is giving us. What I did pick up, though, is that there's a lot of needless fighting, and it doesn't really go anywhere. There's a bit of a standoff, but it's Harley who has some problem solving skills here to realize, how do we best this person? Like, what are the weaknesses of this individual for me to leverage or to take advantage of right now? What's the vulnerability? And she breaks the glass to the giant aquarium, knowing that if anything, Aquaman's going to save the fish and sea life that are in that aquarium. And it works. And he's out of there.
Yeah.
He collects all of the fish
except for the ones that Bane has stomped to death in his own act of villainy. I am killing your fish. But yeah, she is brilliant in this moment and earns the respect of the Legion. However, looks between Poison Ivy and Lex Luthor suggest that even with this, Lex is going to make sure Harley is not accepted without Poison Ivy.
it is a package deal.
And in that moment, when Lex stands up at the lectern and says, we have an announcement to make, we have a new member, we, the audience, are unclear if Poison Ivy gave in, because when speaking to Harley said that if I don't get in, I'm just going to do a swan dive out the window and let my brains smash against the concrete. Well, obviously, Poison Ivy doesn't want that to happen. But we learn very quickly through dialogue between Poison Ivy and Harley that Poison Ivy has not accepted this. She stands by her principles. Mm-hmm. This is not an organization she wants to be a part of or associated with in any way. So she starts saying, well, Harley, what if you and I just split off and create our own organization? You and me, she begins negotiating with her. And really sort of setting Harley up for the very real possibility that Harley will not be accepted. Finally, she comes right out and says it. They don't want you. They're just offering you this in order to get to me, which obviously is going to break the heart of her best friend. And in that moment, Lex Luthor announces, possibly in the most villainous moment of the episode, that it is in fact Harley Quinn. So what he's almost done there is set up this rivalry between two besties, and he's put a wedge between them by using their own emotion for one another. Mm-hmm. And now for the rest of the episode, there's a rift where there's this understanding that Harley now realizes she was good enough, she succeeded. Poison Ivy must be jealous or constantly wanting to keep her down because Harley Poison Ivy only likes Harley when she's at her lowest and wants to like be there to help. But now Harley is saying, I don't need your help anymore. I'm now a full-fledged member of the Legion of Doom. I don't need you.
And she's sort of doubling down on this affinity group, you know, wanting to be a part of this club, this society that has rejected her for some time. I mean, I think these are maybe the two most evil things that the Legion of Doom could do. One is to isolate Harley from her best friend, and the second is not to validate parking, which we established at the beginning of the episode. Yeah. I think, this is a huge turning point for the show, because all along Ivy has been such a strong supportive figure for Harley, and we've talked about this friend helping Harley to develop and grow and to bring really healthy thoughts. This is a turning point that worries me, because Harley is going to be associating with really bad influences. And look, you know, we've talked about villains before. It's not so much that they're bad influences because they're villains, but that they're for me, they're bad influences because fundamentally they don't share the same values that Harley shares. And we'll probably start to unpack that more as the season progresses, and maybe even at the end of the season we'll see that divide. Yeah. That there's a lot of different characters that we're introduced to in the Legion of Doom. There are some villains there that are the intellectual past professors, previous scientists who have found that they can dial into their intellectualism and use that for gaining power. There's I'm looking for a fair and dignified word for someone who's low functioning on the intellectual spectrum. Right. But like a Bane who is there maybe for other reasons to kind of get leverage from people who do have good ideas, but he's the muscle, so he brings something helpful to the group. So you have a variety of people with different skills and assets.
Which, by the way, you mentioned Bane, and again, this is a divergence from the comic book where Bane is actually a brilliant for sure. Person, but someone even says they even let Bane in here. You know, like it's
like the bar is kind of low.
Yeah, they have set the bar so low they even let Bane in, and then Lex Luthor makes the acknowledgement. There are a lot of politics involved in allowing Bane in.
Exactly, which, you know, even just that statement means, look, we're not a fair system. Yeah. We know that Harley's one of the very few women that are inducted into the Legion of Doom. We know that it's not a fair recruitment system. We realize that this is a very corrupt group of people, and because they're villains, they get a pass for that. For me, this brings up a topic that is maybe very relevant right now in our world, which is when we're faced with people who are different than us. And I know we're talking about the various villains in Legion of Doom, but what I want to talk about is the overt or the emerging differences between Harley and Ivy, because Harley wants to join a group of people that are corrupt or that have harmful ideas or that aren't looking out for Harley in the end. Because I think Poison Ivy is fundamentally trying to tell her, you want to be a member with a group of people that fundamentally do not care about your rights, do not care about your welfare, and want to take advantage of you. Yeah. On the other hand, I do care about you as a person. I do support you. Join me. Like be as affiliated with me. We can put up any name we want on.
Yeah.
And that reminds me a lot of what a lot of us deal with right now, which is, how do I have respectful conversations? How do I enter into dialogue or engagement, especially with someone I care about who has very fundamental differences or who has some existing current momentary differences or perspectives? For psychologists, we call this dialogue across difference or engagement across difference. And it's a style of communication that requires techniques and approaches and various aspects of holding the self responsible and holding others responsible that can move us from being in a kind of stuck point to maybe a better place. And I want to be clear that I'm not talking about, because like with Harley and Ivy, this, maybe you can play a little clip that you have of things really mounting, things really coming to a peak between them, where Harley believes that Ivy doesn't have her interests in mind because Harley wants to join this new group.
Yeah, sure. Here we go.
Don't put your insecurities on me.
All right, here we go. What? You tell me, what insecurities?
You just don't want me to join because you're afraid I won't need you anymore.
You are delusional.
Am I? You loved it when I was all beaten down and brokenhearted after breaking up with Joker. But you hate it now that I'm better at making something of myself.
Ooh, snap. Damn!
That's not true.
It's true. You can't handle it, can ya?
What?
You're trying to sabotage me instead of confronting the fact that without me, you don't have a single friend in this world.
So this is something that we don't want, right? We don't want, while it's very normal to be argumentative and to fight, like we don't want to have a conversation that's combative and doesn't lead to a solution. Mm-hmm. And when I say engagement across difference, I want to be clear again that I'm not talking about changing someone's mind or having the goal of simply doubling down on your own interests. But we're both here to learn something. We're both here to expand our mindset a little bit. And I want to admit that, especially for us in the US, that we do have a problem right now with division and being non-communicative with folks with polarized perspectives. Does that resonate for you when I say that in that way?
More than you could possibly imagine. Yes.
I'm going to just say a thing. It is February 28th, and I'm going to say this in a subtle or maybe not so subtle way. When I talk about dialogue across difference, I mean a reasonable and respectful commitment to standing your ground, speaking your mind, and listening to others in order for all of us to grow. And we've seen that when some people are in positions of leadership and take on a conversation, a discussion, a visiting leader from another place to come together and have a discussion, it's not going to go well if any one of us are bullying the other person, are exploitative, are loud and aggressive, and have no interest in listening to the other person's point of view. Okay, so I'm going to say that. In other words, there has to be a willingness when we have, well, I'm going to come back to Poison Ivy and Harley. There has to be a willingness to sit with other ideas. That's it. There doesn't have to be a willingness to change your idea necessarily, but just a willingness to hear out other ideas and to hold space together. I realize the word holding or the term holding space is kind of being overused right now, but I'm going to reclaim that phrase, holding space. What does that actually mean? It means a willingness to be patient, to be curious, to stand by your own integrity, and to listen, even if you're listening to ideas that might be difficult for you to hear.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, at UCLA where I work, we have a center that's called Dialogue Across Difference. There's an entire office at our university that specializes in dispatching experts, trainers, academics, folks that study this, and help us like come to the table and have conversations, again, with a mutual respect that all of us deserve to be at the table. So
Although I'm going to have to tell you, you're going to have to change the name of that office.
We may have to change the name of the office.
Because there are, like you said, there are people who aren't interested in your point of view if you are on the opposite side. I'll even go so far as to say, and maybe this is too much information for our listeners, but I feel like the majority of our listeners understand who we are and where we're coming from and the value that a podcast like this has to the world. I'm not trying to like inflate our egos. I'm trying to say that we are trying to make information available about mental health and mental illness available to the world at large by using pop culture in order to help educate, so that you don't have to be wealthy to go to college to learn psychology. You don't have to watch shows with doctors who are blandly talking about philosophies and techniques and all of that other stuff without fully being able to grasp it. We are trying to make it palatable for a wide range of audiences. And we have actually, over the last month, had people drop out of our Patreon because they do not agree with our being vocal about our views. Mm-hmm. So that's an example of people who don't want to hear it, don't want to engage in an actual conversation about it. Mm-hmm. And I don't feel like that does any good. I don't feel like it's sort of counterintuitive to what the show is genuinely about. And I'm glad that this episode, that we're covering this episode when we are, if that makes sense.
It does. And I want to invite people to allow and be willing to hear other podcasts, not just ours, right?
Oh, yeah.
I hope you still listen to ours, but
Sure.
but there are other voices out there. I'm grateful that I'm one of many voices that people might be listening to. For those who actually are still in our community and still listening to the show.
Luckily, I will say most of you.
Yeah.
Most of you are
It's
still
not like
here.
there's this huge exodus. What I want to do is to strengthen your ability to tolerate difficult conversations, meaning that I do want folks to be encouraged and feel valued enough to stay in a difficult conversation or to approach a different polarized, perspective with some of these health tips in mind. So thinking again about Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy arguing over a situation, fundamentally there's something at the core of that difference, which is that Harley wants to be affiliated with a group of people that are doing harm.
Yeah.
And Poison Ivy is trying to bring her back to a friendship, a bond that might be more healthy for Harley. So if we would suggest, if I were a counselor with them and I would suggest they'd have a conversation together, what I want is a goal that they have a productive conversation that they're both, ready to have. But there are some prep tips. So if you're in a situation like this and you're about to have a conversation or a dialogue, what are the things you can prepare for?
So to be clear, this is someone who knows they are about to go into this conversation. This isn't someone who is suddenly in the conversation.
Yeah.
These are prep
Oh,
tips
for sure.
for the
sure.
conversation.
No one should feel sabotaged or no one should feel surprised by a difficult conversation. But maybe it's a phone call you're going to have, or maybe it's a family dinner, or maybe it's a colleague or someone close to you. One thing to keep in mind is that you have an interest in having this conversation, right? The first thing I'd say is, what is your goal for the engagement? What are you hoping to get out of it? Realistically, are you wanting to share what your worldview is? Are you there to be, particularly articulate about what it is you believe in? Are you trying to move that person into another perspective? Even if that's a goalpost that's further out, that might still be your goal. But the clearer you are in your mind about what do I want in this conversation, the more regulated you're going to feel.
Okay.
If you're not clear, you may feel anxious. You may feel more uncertain, and you're not going to be as effective in your communication. The second thing is to know your triggers. Like, what are the kinds of things? I know my triggers for sure, that if I go into a conversation and somebody claims or suggests that I'm ignorant or not smart enough or not intelligent enough, whatever that is. Like if somebody tries to kind of verbally assault me on being even able to have a conversation like that, that's a trigger for me. So know what it is that are kind of like your landmines there, because then you're going to know what the reaction is. When I feel triggered in a conversation that's difficult, well, I'll ask you, maybe you know, what happens to me if I feel triggered in a conversation I'm having?
I'm just going to tell you, I've never triggered you in a conversation we've had. You've
What do you think happens?
You've never acted adversely. I don't know. Like, what is your? Have I ever seen you get? Well, you do shut down.
You got it.
Yeah, you do shut down.
So what happens is I get very anxious. I kind of stop talking and I shut down. And what I'll say is like my intellectual functioning is just drained. I can no longer think clearly, and that's because my amygdala and the emotional part of my brain is commandeering my thinking, and so I'm not able to say effective things anymore. So think of the 4 F's, right? So when people are triggered, sometimes they withdraw. It's fight or flight, right? You withdraw, you attack, you go numb. Sometimes people start to appease and they say things that they don't mean. Like, oh, you're right. They might not be right.
I have done that.
Yeah, no, that's like the fawning,
pretty
right?
Pretty regularly, I will do it. And I will say, I'm glad that you're having this conversation with me, because my problem is that I'm not a very good debater when it comes to topics, super sensitive topics. Like you want to start debating Batman versus Superman. Well, I got no problem with that. But if you want to have like a geopolitical debate on what's best for the country or the world or whatever, I am going to get anxious and riled up. And I think part of it is an excitement. Like, it's not that I don't have the information. It's that I don't have the ability necessarily to actively have the conversation in the moment. I would be much better having a debate if I could type it out. If I can get my words onto paper, I think I could win a lot of arguments. But because I'm in the moment, I do have a tendency to either freeze or placate. And by placate, I mean I just let them talk, and then I'll tell them kind of what they want to hear, so that it's like, oh, I understand where you're coming from. Meanwhile, in my own head, I'm like, you're a monster. And I don't mean that the person's a monster, but I mean, like, I will be saying,
you're inauthentic.
I wish I could say this. I wish I could say this. And so, yeah, like this episode in particular is going to help me even more than I thought when we sat down.
Another thing I want you to think about is to remember your authentic relationships, and that those connections typically are built on caring about one another and empathy, not so much on big ideas and ideology and jargon and data. This is difficult for me because my love language is data. Like, that's how you're going to have an effective connection with me sometimes. And so when we're struggling and facing or confronting differences in a conversation or with one another, it's helpful to fall back on knowing what that authentic relationship was built around. And I'd say typically a sense of loving kindness, a sense of shared values, hopefully a sense of empathy for one another. And I'll say, when you lose those things, it's okay to create boundaries with that individual as those things start to chip away. But to remember not building the relationship on, we must agree on all of our ideology.
Right.
I think that expectation is too high. Another thing to do is reflect on what you know about the other person. I think Poison Ivy might be forgetting just how much Harley's been through as an abuse survivor, and that belongingness and being cared about and being seen is so important and critical for her. And I think here, while I like that Poison Ivy is trying to get her out of that situation, I think that Ivy needs to understand and think about, like, who is this other person? What matters to them? Mm-hmm. What struggles have they had? What history could they have had to lead them to their current situation and beliefs? And, you know, what is it that you care about this person?
Yeah.
And again, it's not going to necessarily change the perspective that you have, but it might soften a little bit of the approach that you take. And I think that Ivy needs to remember that Harley is looking for interpersonal validation, and being a member of a club like this is a big deal to her. And then lastly, before I go on to like some more additional things during the conversation, is remember that transformation takes time, and it's kind of going back to those expectations. Were you ever a kid? Were you
Yes.
ever a kid? Were you ever asked to hold the responsibility of setting the table at dinner?
Yeah, sure.
This is such a cultural question because for a lot of families, at the end of the day or at dinner time, someone or a couple of people might be responsible for, quote, setting the table. So this is an important dialogue prep as well, where you think about who's at the table, where are they positioned, what needs to be inviting and necessary, what are the tools for eating together, napkins, silverware, plates, etc. I apologize to people who never had the opportunity to have this
To
task.
set a table?
Yes. I was
The
that
opportunity?
I was that person. I think it's a developmental thing.
You've never set the table?
No, I have set the table. I
Oh.
have set the table, but not everyone has had that culture where they set the table or where they even have like a family dinner at the end of the day.
Okay.
But what I'm setting up is the metaphor that just like in a conversation, you don't just show up. You have to think about, again, the
there is a culture in which like the plates and the silverware are just next to the food, and you take your plate and your silverware and and then you just take it to the table.
There's also there's also families that would grab food from a microwave and sit down in front of the TV and like put it on the counter or the
or families that don't eat together at all. Yeah.
Exactly. So I don't want to say that that's what everyone did, but
Sure.
I'm overemphasizing the metaphor. But what's on the menu? What can you expect to be talking about in this conversation? What is absolutely not, I'm vegan, right? I'm not vegan all the time, but if that day I'm vegan, maybe
Which simply means on that particular day you chose not to eat animal products.
Yeah.
Like,
So I'm
Yes.
this, that a number of days out of the week I don't eat meat because I'm lowering my meat consumption for various reasons. And so taking that metaphor to the level of conversations, maybe there's something that is a deal breaker for you. Like if it's in the conversation, you know that that's not going to be a conversation you want to be a part of. And so identify what that menu item is and plan for a redirection. Plan to gently redirect that conversation to a place that you're more comfortable being in. So I think this is, again, just a cheat sheet of some of the preparation tools and some of the ways in which we're encouraged to have difficult conversations. But, I just want to end on these 3 ideas. One is to listen to understand. So that means that when we're in these conversations, we truly sit with the idea that we are patient enough and willing enough to listen to the other person's perspective. We're not just sitting there waiting to respond, but we really are listening and not just hearing. Empathize as authentically as you're able to do so. And then I think the most important part of this is tell your story, whether it's through metaphor, whether it's through real examples, whether it's through difficult things that you might have to disclose even. Help the other person understand how it's not us versus them. It's not me versus you. It's a we. Like, where do we fit in? Where is our common ground? And the landing point is not going to be a smooth runway where we get it. It may be a long process, and it may be a little choppy, and it may not fit the kinds of solutions that we're used to. But again, kind of going back to why this is important is that there may be a possibility there of finding a little bit of compromise and a little bit of empathy. And I'd even say the whole reason we have dialogue across difference is for people to understand the challenges and the perspectives and the hardships that some of us have that are not talked about or that are not welcomed at the table, that are not really said. And so that's the ask. It's again, the holding space. It's the asking for space, and it's the asking for a seat at the table.
Yeah. Yeah. Powerful message. I appreciate that.
Aspirational and audacious.
Yeah, like it's not the kind of thing that I immediately think that I'm going to engage. You know, I'm still going to have that same sort of triggered feeling. But that's usually if I feel like I've been ambushed into a conversation about this thing, not, as you just stated, I have not prepared for this conversation. I did not know this was going to happen in this moment. So I'm definitely going to take those tips into account the next time I know I'm going to walk into a conversation that might be uncomfortable. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Could we also bring up Clayface here for a moment? So Clayface has a tendency to be the butt of a lot of jokes. And in this particular moment, he still was. However, I think it might be the most insightful line of dialogue we've had from Clayface this entire series. Go with me on this. The B plot of this particular episode is that there is a tentacled creature below the mall in which they are headquartered. And Dr. Psycho and the landlord, whatever his name is, I always forget.
Psy?
Yeah. They engage with it. And when the group comes back to the mall, they fall down into the hole that the creature created, and they suddenly find themselves face to face with this gigantic monster. And there is an exchange here that I want to play for you and the audience, and I want to talk about Clayface here for a moment. So let's take a listen to this exchange here.
I can't even imagine what it must be like to go through life a giant, deformed thing.
You can't imagine it.
So in this moment, Dr. Psycho, like the rest of us, are acknowledging that Clayface does not look like a normal person. Clayface is bigger than most people. Clayface is a monsterish looking thing to most ordinary people. Mm-hmm. And yet he doesn't see himself that way. Mm-hmm. And that to me is telling. It's written and performed as a joke.
Right.
But let's put ourselves actually in Clayface's shoes in that moment. He has enough self-value, and he has enough, he understands what he is. He just doesn't see it the way others see it, if that makes sense.
It does, completely. And you're right, he is an abomination on the outside. Yeah. That his natural form is not traditionally attractive. It's a pile of mud. It's clay. It's dripping off his body. It's deformed. How many ways can I say that most people would encounter this person and classify them as a frightening monster? Where he would overcome that is in his ability to identify. It's almost like I'm seeing two parts of this. And this actually comes from internal family systems, which if you're not a counselor or psychologist, you can ignore that. But basically it means that because he has a strong sense of his self and the compartments and identities and all the facets that make him whole and real and valued, he doesn't necessarily see that or experience that his outward visage is all that big of a deal. Like it's one of many parts of him.
Yeah.
And in fact, because he's a shapeshifter, he has the ability to take on and display any appearance he wants, which I think has built his confidence.
Yeah.
He knows what it's like to be in an attractive body. He plays with that.
Yeah.
He can't, I'm going to say he camps with that. Like he's campy. Like he puts on, as an actor and as a shapeshifter, he puts on different identities and different visages and different appearances. So he knows
he can be anything you want him to be.
He knows exactly what it's like to appear in a way that society values him and is attracted to him, honestly.
Yeah.
So he experiences that. He knows what that's like. I think for him, and I said there are two parts to this. The first part is that there's all these different sides that he's able to exercise. And I think that my characterization of Clayface is that the different appearances, the different shapes he takes on, he fundamentally integrates as a part of who he is. Mm-hmm. That's not being another. He's a true actor, right? Like he puts on that persona and those characteristics and those features until he feels like he is behind that. That is authentically who he is.
Yeah.
I think too, the second part of it is, and it's not necessarily the opposite thing of what I'm saying, but a second layer of this is that it's almost as if because he's so unique, because we don't come across somebody like him, that he's proud of his look, that he's, I think that he's confident in his look as his natural self. Yeah. It's almost like he knows something people don't know. Like, well, they don't see what I see, right?
Well, it's why he maintains that look instead of constantly going around looking like someone else.
Yeah. Well, we've had this conversation with Mystique, right?
Yeah.
Why don't you just show up as Jennifer Lawrence?
Right.
Or why don't you just show up as Rebecca Romaine Stamos or Rebecca Romaine? Those are beautiful people. And the answer is they're not beautiful to me.
Well,
like,
and not only that, but they're not me. Like if I were playing Aquaman, I am embodying a character, and that is not my authentic self. So Clayface, more than anyone on this group, has embraced who he is as his authentic self, not as a mask or a character he has to play in order to pass.
Yeah, he might be healthier than all of us. Yeah, honestly,
that's what I'm saying. Is I feel like this one joke played at his expense actually reveals more about this one character than maybe this entire show has given us for anyone else. You know, that he is genuinely healthy in that particular mindset, in that I am who I am. It's why he is constantly a mud monster and not someone, you know, that you could just find on the street. He is unmistakable when you see him. But he knows that he can mask. He knows that he can shift into whatever makes you comfortable or whatever. It's just that is a performance for him. And that requires preparation. That requires, you know, the actor's process, which annoys a lot of the people that are around him. When
they all leave their weapons at security, he brings his acting book.
Yeah, his acting book.
He's like, this is my weapon. This is the tool I use.
This is the tool I use to do what I need to do these dastardly deeds. And when they say, no, that's okay, we don't need that, he's like, all right, well, when I kill you with my acting ability, you will think differently. Like it's No, 100%. 100%. I think this scene, this line, this episode made me love Clayface more. And I mean this genuinely, although it might seem hyperbolic. Of all of the years, the decades of stories that I have read or seen or heard about Clayface, this has made me fall in love with Clayface.
Wow. That's...
It could be Alan Tudyk.
Yeah.
It could be the performance.
So not my commentary on necessary evil supervillains of DC Comics.
Or it could be your commentary on DC's necessary evil, the supervillains of DC Comics. Yeah, no, like I really enjoyed the Clayface one-off, the One Bad Day Clayface comic. That was great. I think that a lot of people are figuring out really cool, great ways of telling a Clayface story. And I think it's why I'm excited for Mike Flanagan's take on Clayface when that eventually comes to fruition. I am excited by this character for the first time in a really long time. And I think this show has really helped me find an appreciation for him. And again, this moment in particular.
Well, I welcome you into the club of the mud monster f***ers. We probably should bleep that, but we welcome you into the club.
Yeah, all right, thanks. This is a club I've always wanted to be a member of.
All right, well, yeah, we're going to be coming toward the end of the season.
I was
Harley
about to
Quinn.
say we're getting super close to the end of the season. So if you are not already a member of our Patreon, you might want to become a member very shortly, because for only $3, you can join the tier that gets you access to deciding what we cover next. And we've got a long list of topics that we've wanted to cover in the past that have all, for one reason or another, not won those polls. You're going to start seeing them return very shortly, sooner than maybe any of us really think. So stay tuned for that. Just go to patreon.com/Arkham Sessions and join. And yeah, I'm excited to see what we cover next here in the next few episodes.
Me too.
Until our next time, Dre, why don't you tell the good folks where they can find you online?
You can find me online. My website is drdreapsychology.com, and my social media is Dr. Drea Psychology.
You can find me, I am mostly on Instagram at B_Ward028. You can find us both on Instagram at The Arkham Sessions. You can also find me on Blue Sky, Threads, all of those, sort of the anti-Twitters. And then you can email us, arkhamsessions@gmail.com. Join our Facebook. Come join Discord, which I know you are especially fond of, Drea. And like I said, our Patreon, patreon.com/Arkham Sessions. Speaking of Patreon, I want to thank some of the members who have helped make this episode and all of our episodes possible, starting with Abby, Bert Compton, Aaron Wenrick, Mike Ficklin, Lindsay B., Jameric YJ, Peter, and SK. Thank you all so much for your support. It means a lot to us. We really couldn't do this show without you. And so we want to throw out that thank you to you. If you want to have your name called out in the next episode of the podcast, just go to patreon.com/Arkham Sessions and join the $5 tier. That gets you called out. And then there are a bunch of other tiers in there as well that you might want to take a look at. Until next time, I'm Brian Ward.
I'm Dr. Drea Letamendi.
And together we are
The Arkham Sessions.
So you've got a fish tank and you do improv? Wow, you're my shitty college boyfriend.